The family conflict took an unexpected turn when the mother-in-law took a desperate step. She deliberately broke her nose on the door and fell to the floor, feigning unconsciousness. When the ambulance crew arrived, the woman was moaning pitifully. The daughter-in-law's head was slammed against the wall. An experienced doctor carefully examined the injured woman. Then he turned to her daughter-in-law and uttered a phrase that changed everything. "Hello, dear listeners. This is Andre Belli, and you're on the channel Revelation of Daughters-in-Law. I present to you my new story. Enjoy listening." Olga Dmitrievna Cherneva always considered herself a natural actress. In her youth, she performed in amateur theater. Then, she spent her entire life putting on performances for neighbors, colleagues, and relatives. She was especially hard on her daughter-in-law, Tamara, who had married her only son, Igor, 3 years earlier. From the very first day, Olga Dmitrievna disliked her son's young wife. Tamara worked as an administrator at a dental clinic, earned a decent salary, was independent and self-sufficient, and most importantly, had no intention of dancing to her mother-in-law's tune. After his marriage, Igor moved in with his wife in her one-room apartment, which sent Olga Dmitrievna into a state bordering on hysteria. She believed that her son should bring his young wife back to his parents' home and live under the wing of a wise mother. But Tamara flatly refused to move into her mother-in-law's communal apartment, where she occupied 2 of the 3 rooms, while the third was occupied by an alcoholic neighbor. A real war had begun. Olga Dmitrievna attacked from all fronts. She complained to her son about feeling unwell, threw tantrums, and accused her daughter-in-law of stealing her child from her. Igor was torn between his wife and mother, but increasingly sided with Tamara, which further enraged his mother-in-law. Olga Dmitrievna especially disliked family dinners on Sundays, when the newlyweds came to visit. Tamara spoke politely, helped cook and washed the dishes, but she maintained a dignified demeanor and refused to be bossed around. This infuriated her mother-in-law. On that fateful Sunday evening, Olga Dmitrievna decided to stage a grand spectacle. Igor went to the store for bread, and the women were left alone. Her mother-in-law launched into her usual lectures about respecting elders, how a daughter-in-law should care for her mother-in-law, and how young people live improperly. Tamara washed the dishes silently, timidly, ignoring the attacks. This finally drove Olga Dmitrievna to her breaking point. She rose from the table, walked to the door, and slammed her face into it. The blow was so hard that blood gushed from her nose. Olga Dmitrievna fell to the floor and closed her eyes, feigning unconsciousness. Tamara turned at the sound of the fall and gasped, seeing her mother-in-law in a pool of blood. "Olga Dmitrievna, what happened?" Her mother-in-law didn't answer, only Tiko Postanovi. Tamara rushed to call an ambulance, then her husband. Igor arrived 10 minutes later and found his wife in a panic and his mother on the floor with a broken nose. "Mom, my God, what happened?" "I don't know." Tamara was on the verge of tears. "I was washing the dishes, heard a crash, turned around, and she was already lying there." Olga Dmitrievna opened her eyes and looked at her son with such a pained expression that his heart sank with pity. The ambulance arrived half an hour later. The team was led by a doctor in his 50s with a tired face and intelligent eyes. His name was Sergei Pavlovich Kuznetsov, and in his 20 years of practice, he had seen all sorts of things. The doctor knelt down next to the victim and began his examination. Olga Dmitrievna immediately came to life and began moaning. "Oh, doctor, it hurts so much. My daughter-in-law was banging her head against the wall. I just asked her to help with the housework, but I can't." Igor turned pale and looked at his wife with horror. Tamara stood there thunderstruck. "That's not true," she gasped. "I didn't touch her." "Of course you'll deny it," the mother-in-law hissed. "Doctor, look how aggressive she is. I'm scared." Sergei Pavlovich silently continued his examination. He carefully examined the nature of his daughter's injury, measured her blood pressure, checked her pupils, then stood up and stared intently at Tamara. "Show me your hands," he asked. Tamara held them out. The doctor examined them carefully, especially her knuckles and palms. Now roll up your sleeves. There wasn't a single scratch or the slightest redness on Tamara's hands. The doctor nodded and returned to the injured woman. Olga Dmitrievna tried to stand up. I can't, I'm dizzy. Nausea. The mother-in-law groaned dramatically. Okay, then I'll explain what happened. The doctor stood up and looked at everyone present. The nature of the nasal injury indicates that the blow was inflicted by a flat object, most likely a door. A punch or a slamming of the head against the wall would have produced a completely different picture. Olga Dmitrievna's eyes widened. Furthermore, the doctor continued, if there had been a beating, there would have been marks on the attacker's hands, bruises, blood, swelling. Your daughter-in-law's hands are completely clean. But on your clothes, Olga Dmitrievna, I see an imprint of the door handle at chest level. This indicates that you hit the door with your whole body. It was she who pushed me. The mother-in-law tried to salvage the situation. It's impossible. A blow to the back or chest causes a person to fall by inertia. You have a facial injury, which is only possible if you were moving toward the door on your own. Besides, judging by the blood spatter on the floor, you hit your nose while facing the door, not with your back to it. Igor looked at his mother in amazement. Tamara felt the weight of the accusation lift from her shoulders. And finally, the doctor said, clearly enjoying the revelation, in a real beating, the victim usually experiences shock, confusion, and fear. But you, Olga Dmitrievna, are too coherent in your description of the circumstances of the incident and are so specific in your accusations. It sounds more like a prepared speech. His mother-in-law slowly turned pale. Igor looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. Mom, is this true? Did you hit yourself? Igor, son, you won't believe this charlatan. Olga Dmitrievna tried to get up, but the doctor stopped her with a gesture. Lie down for now. You really do have a broken nose, albeit your own fault, but the most interesting part is yet to come. What do you mean? Tamara asked. Knowingly making a false report of a crime is punishable under Article 306 of the Criminal Code by a fine of up to 120,000 rubles or forced labor for up to 2 years. And attempting to slander someone by accusing them of assault can be considered libel under Article 281. This is an even more serious offense. At these words, Olga Dmitrievna actually lost consciousness. This time for real. Sergei Pavlovich called an ambulance and took his mother-in-law to the hospital. Igor and Tamara were left alone in the apartment where the farce had recently unfolded. Forgive me, Igor said quietly. For a second I believed her. How could I? You're her son, it's natural, Tamara replied, though resentment still seethed within her. No, it's unnatural. I should have realized right away that Mom was capable of such a thing. How many times has she staged such a spectacle before? Olga Dmitrievna spent 3 days in the hospital. Her nose really was broken. She had to undergo surgery, but the worst awaited her at home. Sergei Pavlovich, it turned out, was not only a doctor but also a man of principle. He filed a false report with the police. Moreover, the story quickly spread throughout the hospital, and from there to Olga Dmitrievna's neighbors. The woman who had spent her entire life trying to appear a victim of circumstances and the poor treatment of others suddenly found herself at the center of a scandal. The communal apartment neighbors, who had previously sympathized with her suffering at the hands of her terrible daughter-in-law, now looked at her with disdain. Igor came to see his mother. The conversation was difficult. How could you, Mom? How could you accuse Tamara of beating her? I wanted you to understand what she was really like. Olga Dmitrievna sobbed. She took my son away from me. No one fought me. I'm a grown man, I make my own choices, and you almost sent an innocent person to prison. But nothing terrible happened. The doctor figured it out. If he hadn't, if it had been a different doctor, Tamara could have been charged with a crime. Olga Dmitrievna realized she'd gone too far, but it was too late. The police did indeed open a case of false accusation. Despite her age and tears, the mother-in-law had to pay a fine of 80,000 rubles, almost all of her savings. But the main punishment was different. Igor stopped communicating with her. He visited once a month, bringing groceries and medicine, but his manner was stiff and formal. He never brought Tamara back. Until you apologize to your wife and ask her forgiveness for the false accusations, I don't want to see you, he told his mother. Olga Dmitrievna proudly declared that she would never humiliate herself in front of some daughter-in-law. Igor shrugged and left. A year passed. The mother-in-law sat in her communal apartment, surrounded by the contempt of her neighbors and the indifference of her son. The alcoholic in the next room, having learned of her prank, began to indulge in all sorts of liberties, playing music at night, bringing in bottled drinks, and littering the hallway. Previously, he had been somewhat intimidated by the scandalous Olga Dmitrievna, but now he treated her like a clown. Meanwhile, Tamara and Igor announced they were expecting a child. Olga Dmitrievna learned of this from a neighbor, who heard the good news while waiting in line at the clinic. The thought that she might never see her grandson again completely broke the proud woman. On Tamara's birthday, she dialed her daughter-in-law's number. Tamara, it's me, Olga Dmitrievna. I'm listening. Hey. I wanted to apologize for what happened a year ago. I was wrong. Long pause. Olga Dmitrievna, I never held a grudge against you. You are my husband's mother, but what you did was very cruel. Understand. Please forgive me. I will not interfere in your life anymore. Another pause. I forgive you and congratulations on your future grandson or granddaughter. Olga Dmitrievna burst into tears on the phone. 2 years later, the young couple had a daughter. Igor brought his mother to the maternity hospital to see her granddaughter through the glass. Olga Dmitrievna stood and cried, looking at the tiny creature in a pink blanket. Relationships in the family didn't improve immediately. Her mother-in-law kept a low profile, never trying to boss them around or offer advice. Tamara gradually warmed up and began occasionally asking for help with the baby. And Dr. Sergei Pavlovich, who had become the unwitting hero of the family drama, received a letter of thanks from Igor and Tamara 3 years later. The envelope contained a photograph of the happy family of 4. By then, a son had been born, along with a short note. Thank you for restoring justice and helping us find our way back to each other. The doctor smiled, put the letter away, and went to see another patient. This was far from the first time in his practice that a medical examination had helped expose lies and restore the truth in family conflicts.